Boom. According to that, we are live. My name is Hiko Simon. It's good to see you. Welcome to Tokyo Tonight. Yeah, got a bunch of things to talk about tonight, although I will also aim to go pretty fast. I've been thinking lately, apart from the fact that the show's been taking too long, it also isn't easy to just create a track really fast, and I kind of miss the old Chaosilator sessions. So the other idea that I have is that at the end of this stream, I would like to just make a Chaosilator track for the first time in a while. Yeah, I've got the camera and everything all set up for that, so hopefully that'll work. Yes, indeed, Mr. Cordy Chep. I guess I ended up being 5 minutes late. Sorry about that. Who's counting? Quint Ranked, good to see you there in the comments. Mr. Cordy Chep, good to see you. Hope everyone is well. Hope everyone is staying safe. Tokyo, in terms of where we are at with the COVID-19 situation, it is still, we got down to like single digits in Tokyo for a time. There have been a couple of clusters, one particularly in a hospital in Western Tokyo, Kogane Hospital. Another involving a host club that I mentioned last week, and they're still finding people connected to that, both the hosts who work there and I guess the people who attended that place. There's been a lot of focus in Tokyo on town of the night. Mainly they're referring to kabukicho, and they're referring to primarily things like host and hostess bars, but probably everything going up from that. Hey, Raz Al Ghul, indeed, let the games begin. Good to see you. We are still seeing cases. I guess the system here isn't really designed to eradicate the disease. It's really made just to control the biggest clusters. And they're doing an okay job of that, but the rest of Japan, by the way, outside of Tokyo and the adjacent prefectures, is actually doing really well. So, I saw the news today, Mr. Cordy Chep, that Melbourne indeed had a big cluster. I guess this is the sort of thing that happens. They actually featured Australia and China as countries that are going into a second wave or trying to take steps to avoid a second wave. And they featured Sydney on the children's news, the news with the racist animation last week. They featured the Sydney train system for that. One thing everyone was commenting on was how no one in Australia wears masks. And even the NHK correspondent who was explaining what was going on in Australia said that, yes, originally she was wearing a mask when no one else was, but then people would look at her like she had it, and in the end she felt so self-conscious that she kind of stopped wearing it as well. And everyone in NHK was saying, don't pay attention, wear a mask. So cultural differences are coming up there as well. In fact, that was a tweet I don't think I included on the show, but there was some Japanese psychologist offered up a theory that I immediately shared with Rochelle, who's gathering up all of these sorts of examples. I share these. It doesn't mean that I necessarily endorse them at all. But I thought it was kind of interesting that there was a theory that Westerners, Americans and Europeans are the characters that get used, but I guess it includes countries like Australia as well. One reason that Japanese are more comfortable wearing masks, it was thrown out there, is that in cultural communication, in language communication, and certainly when I think about French people I know, when I played rugby with French people speaking, they use their mouths a lot, and not just to make the sounds, but also to express, they use their entire faces to communicate a lot. Japanese tend to be very poker-faced, of course, making big generalizations here. But there was a suggestion that the additional reliance upon the visibility of the face, and particularly the mouth, for communication heightens the sense of unease that many Europeans and Americans have of people wearing masks. That they're hiding something. It is again, a lot of people poured cold water over that and said people are just people, which is true. But this is if you are talking about there is some things to this. Like, for example, it's true that when Japanese learn English, they have to practice stretching their faces because some language schools teach warming up by stretching the face, because you use your face more in English than you do in Japanese. There's also something to the idea that Nikkei Japanese have the appearance to Japanese people, and to me, I've lived here so long, You know, genetically they're the same, but they have this kind of different look. And it's hard to put your finger on, but I've had a linguist explain to me that Nikkei Japanese have stronger face muscles, and it's just based on growing up speaking English as opposed to Japanese that don't. So it was an interesting theory. But yeah, I'm definitely wearing a mask everywhere. Even going down just to throw the rubbish out in the building, I wear a mask. So you know, I've become pretty used to it. I didn't really wear a mask. I didn't get hay fever that bad or anything like that. So I never really wore masks at all until I had a kid, and right after I had a kid. My son was born in 2009. I think it was 2010. We had the SARS scare. And, you know, when we had a kid who was less than a year old and I wanted to go watch the New Zealand versus Australia Bledisloe match, I wore a mask to that. And I remember I got a bit of a hard time from some of the visitors, from some of the people in the crowd who thought it was odd to see me wearing a mask. And I must admit I wasn't totally comfortable in it myself, but I've become pretty comfortable over the years. Demonstrate some face stretching. Well, I'm not an English teacher, but apparently it's a lot of like literally like this, like stretching your face. Because yeah, it makes Japanese people get really tired, like their face muscles get really tired, which I kind of get. And it's probably true that speaking Japanese a lot, yeah, it gets kind of it adds to the reverse culture shock and the stress that you feel going back. 2004 was it? There was something in 2010, or maybe it was after 2010, but maybe it was 2009. There was something that went on in 2009 or 2010. When I had a baby, that there was a scare that prompted me probably for the first time to take seriously wearing masks. So I don't know. Someone can maybe Wikipedia it. 2009 or 2010, there was some scare. I thought it was SARS. It might have been you know, swine flu or something like that. You know, they had a whole bunch. They had bird flu. They had swine flu. They had. I remembered it as SARS, but I guess if it was a different year, it was a different year. Remember, as always, great to see Marcos Fernandez there in the comments. Remember, as always, if you want to grab my attention, just at Mark Equals Simon, it will flash orange. You can give me topics to talk about. I will talk about them. Ask me questions. Do whatever. I did one other thing before I start up today. As I mentioned on Twitter today, I've kind of hit, now that we've just had the first presidential election rally, and there's a lot of people. Dave O'Hunter, what year was RAV4? RAV4 was available before I came to Japan, so that was available in the 90s. That was a great car. But yes, probably bird flu is probably one of them anyway. Where was I? Yes, the now that we've had the first, you know, and just the level of just sheer stupidity of the news coming out of the US. And here's the thing. Americans are not stupid people. It might seem incredible given the news that we are forced to read and the social media that we see. The smartest and people I most respect that I work with are Americans. You know, Americans are awesome. And you go to America, and shockingly, America is a country with 300 mostly normal people. But something has gone so wrong there with the way that the news media cycle, the social media stuff, and it gets so filled up with information that's designed to trigger reactions. And I'm not American. I don't live there. Like even when I'm feeling like, oh, I want to respond and say, isn't this stupid? That's what it's for. And I'm realizing already, man, this is going to be a really long, like, how many months is it till the election in the US? And I really wish that I could, I tweeted today, I just want to shut off all news from America. It's the downside of speaking English, I suppose, is that it's so dominated by that one country, even though, of course, there's many more countries than that. I love America, and I know that people there are not as stupid as they appear to be every time I see the news. The idea that they could elect leaders that are like the leaders that they have, you know, that reflects on the people of America. Even if you didn't vote, or actually, it totally reflects on you if you didn't vote. And even if you didn't vote for the leaders, it still reflects on you. You know, in your media and your news, and it makes Americans look terrible. And I find it exhausting to follow. So I actually did a tweet today where I was talking about how I'm still not talking about anything about Trump. Don't care about him. I am putting lately the news with Korea has been interesting, and I used to find the Korea stuff really frustrating and triggering. So I like had a no Korea, no Trump policy that I put on Twitter for a while. I'm taking Korea off the bench. Korea, you're okay. You're back in the game. It's actually I felt almost like, oh good, they're suing Japan. You know, it's like, oh, back to old days. This is actually wonderful. America, however, is on the bench where Korea was. They're swapping it. I'm swapping them out. I'm putting America on the bench, and I'm putting Korea back in the game. So congratulations, Korea. America must try harder. And yeah, you know, I really hope that. And my commiserations to the people who have to live through it. But yeah, it is annoying. But I'm really going to try as hard as I can to avoid news about that place. There's plenty of good news, interesting news going on in Japan and outside of that country that's far more consequential to me, and that's what this show is going to be about. That's what I'm going to share. So good to see some more people rolling in, by the way. We've got Olivier D, H1N1. And you know what? I think it was H1N1, yeah, bird flu. Mogberry Pie, how's it? Good to see you. Also good to have Savas Musician. Sensationalism generates advertisement. Well, that's the whole thing. Well, not only advertisement, it actually just generates engagement, the whole idea of these sites. And I think actually Facebook is far more sinister than Twitter. I like Twitter. But of course, the problem is the people who I most like to follow, who are journalists, of course, they follow news. And it's just so stupid right now. So yeah, it's and you know, the algorithms are designed to pick up content that generates reactions, and you know, they're getting better and better at finding people's buttons, and they're finding mine, and I'm getting frustrated reading it. So yeah, that's, I think, a bit of for self-care. I am avoiding that stuff. So yeah, Tech Art too, awesome to see. Howdy indeed. Looks like we've got everyone in the comments right now. Korea should say something bad about New Zealanders to get benched again. Well, you know, I'm sure that time will come, but for now, New Zealand's doing okay. Interesting home situation. My dad's now moved into the new house in Kerikeri, which I can't wait to go and visit. And it's actually I like having the possibility of going to Australia and New Zealand for trips. In fact, that's one of the stories that we've got. The Japan's opening up mutual travel ties. They've just done a deal with Vietnam, and they're about to open. They're negotiating to do the same with Australia and New Zealand and Thailand. So, yeah, good news from that perspective. And right now, I have family members in quarantine in New Zealand who have just gotten back from UK. So yeah, lots of good stuff happening over there. Well, I think America's putting itself in isolation. This is the thing. I think Americans get so tiresome of all the international wars and so on. America is fundamentally an isolationist country, and I think they're entitled to be. It's one of the things that makes America good, is the fact that people there don't want to be like the British Empire. It's just the way that things have worked out. I think, as I'll say again and again, the world is a better place for the US being involved in it. I mean, you know, the US deciding to get involved in World War II was decisive to the outcome, and in World War One. And it's been decisive in the stability and peace that's allowed countries like Japan to become like it is. So I'm not a fan of the idea of America isolating, but it's definitely self-isolating. The problem is, of course, that you know, we're also engaged with the media over there. You know, we can't really get away. So anyway, into the topics. So first of all, I'm actually doing something new. I am in the habit now, as I've mentioned in previous weeks, of watching more YouTube than I'm watching TV or Netflix. And there's a lot of really good stuff. And I download. I pay for premium, so I get to download, and I like it. Just gives you a stable connection. I don't need to, you know, even if I'm in a dead spot in the house, or if I do it because I was on the subway before. But anyway, I'm downloading a lot of content, and I'm not going to share everything. But looking back at the last week, I'm going to have a little segment where I share the stuff that's the most interesting. 2 videos. There's this channel called Voices of the Past, and it's awesome. I think I mentioned this before, but basically it's a narrator who reads translations of first sources. So rather than telling a historical story, there's a lot of great history podcasts and channels on YouTube. What this channel's thing is that they read the letters and stories and accounts of different historical figures in the first person, as written by the people themselves. And so they have the accounts here of a sort of a first Japanese, whether you call him a diplomat, But what people who were on the very first parties from the shogunate to visit America and then Europe, and giving basically their diaries of their impressions of being in America and seeing America for the first time and seeing Europe for the first time in the late 19th century, so amazingly late as well. And what this is like, and it's probably a lot like what science fiction movies show as visiting like aliens or something like that. I mean, it was that sort of a level thing. Fascinating. It's like 15 minutes, and it's just a very and what I love about it is the narrator has always got the same voice, but it's always in the first person, and it really does feel like you are hearing the account of the person. So really, really great channel. I really recommend it. Another just sort of good what do they call it? The info animation documentary things. I love these. They talked about the Okuno Torishima, the two rocks in basically I think they're the southernmost point of Japan. There are a couple of islands between Japan and Philippines or Guam or whatever down there, and all the efforts that Japan's making to try to get them converted or recognized as proper islands instead of just rocks, because islands you get an economic zone, and the sea around those areas has a lot of oil and fish and whatnot. So an interesting story about that. Hey, we've got Sachifu. And indeed, I like that you detected the pirate language in in the header of the video. We are getting to that. There is definitely pirates. So hold on. Hey, Sergeant Bilko, good to see you. And yes, remember to say hi when you're coming in, or say Arrrr. Actually, I don't mind that at all. Groucho Marx. It's funny though. For some reason, I've been getting a lot of YouTube's been recommending to me the Dick Cavett show. And I've never heard of this show, but it seems to be a talk show that was going like from the 50s until the 70s, so probably before I was born. This particular show was basically one of the last coherent interviews with Groucho Marx. And, you could see he's just a very smart, very funny guy. And there's so many great interviews from this time with people. For example, they have the Sachifu. I'm going to give you a strike if you carry on a little bit too much with that. I appreciate 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hours, but I think more than 10 is too much, and we are going to have to call in the Coast Guard. So that's warning number 1. Please don't do that so much. But yes, anyway, really good interview. And interesting to watch. This is Tokyo Wave. This features 2 people. One person who I follow on Twitter, and they come out a little bit late, but yeah, thank you. Yes, you have Sachifu, and please, yes, leave it at that. I think you've excellent job of making this all pirate chat. Tokyo Wave, it's a new podcast. They're very well informed and quite entertaining to listen to, talking about the same sort of stuff that I talk about. They come out, their production value is very high. It's so high that it takes about a week to produce, which means that they generally come out a week after the news. So I got them beat for timing. They covered my monkey story that I talked about last week. It just came out yesterday, but it's high production value. It is a podcast. It's pretty good. And it's actually worth checking out. They're quite entertaining, how they talk about things, and I like the theme. So it's a shame it's not video, actually. I mean, with all the lighting and stuff like that. But recommended. Just another thing that was cool that I just watched the other day. There's so many rumors now going around about Apple Glass. Hopefully it's going to be this year, but it looks like it's going to be more likely next year. But there's going to be basically these AR glasses, and then rather than be like Google Glass and have the cameras and everything on that were freaking people out and having kind of weird and in a way it was iconic design, but it also made it easy for people to call out or to pick out people who are wearing them and bully them. These are going to look like normal glasses, but they're going to project basically anything from watching a movie screen on your face, where your eyes can see them, to flashing up emails and notifications and stuff like that. So I think the idea is that you'll be able to basically, well, if you're like me, if you're the sort of person who's basically always walking around looking at, frankly, is kind of addicted to my iPhone, I'm hoping that this will be something which will let you leave the phone in your pocket or in your bag and keep up with things without having to, hold something up all the time. In fact, it'll be like a heads-up display. To me, it's very Minority Report. I think this is very cool. I'm very curious to see how it gets executed. So, yeah, that was that was pretty cool. This is an Australian channel solving the money problem, and they own Tesla stock, and they spend a lot of time talking about how great Tesla is. But there's two videos lately, one on the Cybertruck and one on the upcoming Roadster, that I must admit, when you hear them talk about, like, I don't know a lot about Tesla, but understanding like the way that they've revolutionized the production of cars, like when they're talking about the Cybertruck, assuming that the Cybertruck is going to be like competing with the Ford F-150, for example, and a lot of people might not like a car that looks like the Cybertruck, but the whole genius of it is, apart from the fact that it's got performance better than a Ferrari and it's bigger than a Ford F-150, the cost to manufacture each one of those units is going to be like 1/10 that Ford makes. So, even with modest sales, they're going to make the company a lot more profitable. The Roadster as well, was watching this morning. The Roadster that they're going to release, the standard base model is going to have a 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 kilometers per hour time of 1.9 seconds. Apparently you can't go faster than that without like risking ripping the tires off the car. There is no car at the moment. The fastest cars in the world at the moment are like 2.9, and they're going to aim to be like a second faster than that. Apparently the sports version of this is actually going to contain the same retro air pulse rockets that are actually contained on the SpaceX rockets. And they're going to use those for an extra boost to overcome the tire friction problem. And they reckon that they're going to get it close to 1 second. I mean, actually, which I would think would actually be like you're having your whole body being punched violently. I don't know how you could even drive safely like that, but the point is, it's going to the specs that they're saying is that it's going to have all that level of performance at 1,000 miles range or something. It's going to be able to drive from San Francisco to Los Angeles and back on a single charge. And the idea is just to show that it's pointless making gasoline hypercars anymore. If that's what, and it's going to be worth $250,000, which is expensive, but it's going to outdo $1 million car performance. So to me, like that's all just super cool. So those are the videos I watched this week that were pretty cool. I put up a track actually a week ago that was lately when I've been running every second day, and I run at 83 beats per minute, or generally 166 beats per minute, which is good for listening to drum and bass, happy hardcore, or hip hop. That's 83 BPM. So I made an 83 actually Ottawa, so I guess that was a drum and bass track. Maybe it was a track after this that I put up a hip hop track. I've put up a couple of tracks, but not a lot. But I thought these were quite good, so I shared those. Don't forget, check out the old SoundCloud if you want, and all the music, of course. If you're looking for music to put on your videos, it's free to use and you can monetize it. I do appreciate if you give me a credit for it, but that's what I make it for, to share around. So that's all pretty cool. Waito-san, excellent to see you. Indeed, it's been a while, but it's good to have you here. Hope all is well down in Saga, I believe. I guess it is. You're doing better with COVID-19 anyway than we are, so good to see you indeed. So in terms of big news that's happened this week, the North Korea, Kim Yo-jong, otherwise Kim Yo-jong, otherwise known as Martin Shkreli's twin Asian sister, she suddenly has come on the scene, the sister of Kim Jong-un. And she's come out saying that a couple of balloons launched by defectors saying Kim Jong-un is a fat idiot or something like that, apparently unacceptable. So they've decided to threaten military action against South Korea if they don't stop the defector balloons at once. South Korea immediately said, "Oh, we surrender. We're stopping. We're stopping. We're very sorry for the upset." The North Korea, by the way, the defector groups are actually planning on the 25th to actually go and launch more propaganda balloons over to North Korea. The defectors feel that they need to provide accurate information to people in North Korea to help them out. The South Korean government's like, "Oh, no, we want to be friends with North Korea. We're very sorry." However, North Korea obviously just wants to make a point. So they blew up the liaison building in the Kaesong joint industrial area. Kaesong, by the way, is a joint industrial area within North Korea. It's near the border. That was set up for, I believe, under Kim. There's too many Kims now. Kim Dae-jung. under, I think it was Kim Dae-jung, where they set this up. And the idea was that instead of just providing money and aid to North Korea, they could actually set up a joint industrial state where South Korean companies could actually use North Korean workers and could pay to produce goods jointly with North Koreans. And it was that, and there was a tourist resort nearby. And it seemed like a good idea. Lots of South Koreans wanted to travel into North Korea, see a bit of North Korea's tourism and, tourists. And it was a nice idea for the economy that they could support reunification by having these joint industrial complexes. Of course, the story with that is that it didn't really work out very well. Some of the tourists were shot. Apparently they had a sort of a loosely marked fence boundary around the hotel at the resort where they were allowed to stay. And when an old lady wandered outside it, she was shot dead. Which isn't really a good way to handle tourism. At the industrial complex as well, things got tense, it got shut down, and they sort of stopped using it about 10 years ago now. So it's sort of just been sitting there idle. There was a liaison office, which was where whenever there was a need for bosses to talk between North Korea and South Korea within the industrial state, there was a specific building for that, and that's the building that the North Koreans blew up. So, they're trying to do something kind of flashy. And look, this is better than, other times that North Korea's freaked out, of course. They started randomly shelling islands that they claim that are occupied by South Korea, and they killed people when they did that. So, they're not above actually shelling South Korea and killing people randomly whenever they feel like they want to get someone's attention. So it wasn't measured by that measure, although they did blow something up that was South Korean. It was within North Korea, and it was relatively measured. It was empty. No one got hurt. This is part of the old game. This is the old, I'm so crazy. You don't want to mess with this. Give me what I tell you, and it'll look like you're doing, it lets someone back down, making concessions when it looks like they're doing the right thing by creating a crisis artificially. Everyone's seen this playbook before. And they're getting a bit tired with it. The children's news account of this tonight. Yes, and Sergeant Bilko, you are correct. She is indeed quite skinny. Tech Art 2, by the way, left me a comment. I tried using a DigiWatch to avoid phone checking. Now just another thing to check. LOL. Well, that's exactly. And I personally don't like the design of the eye. Well, for me, the eye watch, and the battery life isn't really good enough for me. So yeah, I'm really interested in what the glasses are going to be like. It's basically a substitute for the watch. But Kim Jong-un and his sister need to go to Tokyo Disneyland, learn to relax. Well, apparently going to Tokyo Disneyland gets you assassinated in the end, as Masao, the much loved by Japanese people older brother of Kim Jong-un, learned, unfortunately. But coming back to this, so yeah, this was actually featured on the children's news as one of the specials, the racist children's news. They do great coverage of this, and I didn't actually appreciate all the nuances of this. I thought this was just North Korea just stomping its feet and demanding attention again. But what's specifically behind this is that when President Moon, the current president of South Korea, as is typical, the left wing in South Korea is always very friendly to North Korea and wants reconciliation. And he came in promising North Korea that they wanted to have better ties with North Korea, and they wanted to resume tourism at that resort where they shot the tourists. And he also wanted to resume industrial cooperation. And they were sort of going to do that, but then America blocked it. They blocked South Korea from the deal because they didn't want any deals being done with North Korea while it was still developing its nuclear program, which of course Kim Jong-un did. He kind of accelerated that program in order to sort of, have a deterrent to use as a negotiation tool. So because they had accelerated with that, Trump stopped South Korea making good on its promise to resume cooperation. And it was because of that and the balloons that North Korea started, blowing stuff up, and they're threatening to blow more stuff up. And South Korea is saying if they do anything military towards South Korea, they're going to react, but they're not going to react to what's going on right now. But the other context of this is that, as I mentioned before, while North Korea doesn't have COVID-19 officially, they have done two things. One, they have closed their border with China, where they get half of their food and their trade. So that's really badly affected the economy. The other problem is that there is a widespread problem with high fever, pneumonia that's killing lots of people that they insist isn't COVID-19, but it looks like maybe they do have it and they are struggling with it. So at home, there's a lot of domestic upheaval, economically and with the health situation. And it could very well be, this is not just an opportunity to build up the little sister, but it's also a chance to sort of distract people and unify people around the idea of a threat with South Korea. Again, I don't really know why they even have to go to this much trouble, given that, this is basically, North Korea is kind of like the Truman Show. They can kind of control everything that the people there see. So why they have to actually have real problems. And this is probably why they're being very measured as well, so they can make it look like, war's going to happen any time, where they're actually being very careful not to actually trigger real military action. But we'll have to see. It is an interesting time. It is kind of funny how North Korea is doing this to South Korea, right as South Korea is taking Japan to the WTO trade court over kind of another ridiculous thing where they're claiming that Japan is put de facto sanctions on them for not complying, ironically, with export compliance of military goods. But yeah, we'll see. That'll be interesting to see how that outcome goes, if Japan can win it or not. But yeah, it's good. I don't know. I'm glad to see North Korea and South Korea acting, North Korea acting crazy to South Korea and South Korea acting crazy to Japan. It feels like we're heading back to normal, and I miss it. I'm kind of happy about that. So yeah, I don't know. I miss you guys. It's kind of good to see. We've got Tokyo 503. Good to see you here. Indeed, he did. He was a character. Who else we got? We got Ohio gozaimasu. We got good morning, Tai Nakamura. Good to see you. Tawaiwai, good to see you. Thank you for the thumbs up. Remember, if you like. And Tim the Asian Ink, awesome to have you there in the comments, as always. And thank you also for the interaction, for the likes on Twitter. I always appreciate it. The other big story this week, Aegis Ashore. Whenever I see Aegis Ashore, I feel like saying Arrrr. Yeah, so what is Aegis? Aegis is basically, everyone remembers during the Gulf War, the Patriot missiles, the anti-missile missiles that could detect and shoot down missiles mid-flight. There was always a bit of controversy as to whether they were actually as accurate as they were made out to be and as breakthrough as they were made out to be, but they were pretty impressive. That system has kind of been improved. The Navy version of the Patriot missile system, and by the way, Japan has tons of Patriot missiles all over the place. Japan also has a bunch of Aegis ships. Aegis ships are regular destroyers, Navy destroyers, but they have a really high-tech, that sort of turret beside where the missile is at the front of the ship. It's basically a state-of-the-art, like the Israeli Iron Dome or the American Patriot system. It's naval-borne, but it's got crazy radar systems that can detect a missile launch hundreds of miles away and fire off missiles that will go and anticipate and go and intercept those missiles. So Japan has gone and bought this Aegis system from the US. So this is the US missile shield, which Japan is paying for the US missile shield to have on 8 destroyers that basically sail around Japan. However, it's been pointed out that the problem with having the destroyers sailing around is that depending on the timing, it might not be ideal and you might not quite get the ideal coverage. And so the Japanese government was considering having 2 land-based versions of the Aegis system rather than on destroyers, and they would be based in Yamaguchi Prefecture and Akita Prefecture in Honshu, Japan, basically the bottom of the island and the top of the island, and they'd be facing the Sea of Japan. And it looks like, I guess the easy way to sell that is that this is for Japanese defense against Tepidon missiles and whatnot from North Korea. However, the truth is, this is really Japan paying for America to have missile defense sites all over Japan, which not only shield from North Korea, but they also shield from China. And that's really what the purpose of this whole system is about. This missile system is Japan paid for US missile defense against China from being able to launch ICBMs at America. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Trump has, of course, now for months been talking about how when they start renegotiating the shared costs, and right now Japan does pay a lot for American forces in Japan, as well as provides them with a bunch of land. Trump is talking about, we're going to get them back for Pearl Harbor and Honda Civics, and we're going to make Japan pay through the nose to have the privilege of U.S. forces defending its shores. There's a lot of problems. There's too many problems with that to really unpack. But the main thing to remember is that those U.S. forces are not in Japan for Japan's benefit. I mean, Japan's definitely taken benefit from it. But the purpose, America, they're not a charity. They're not there as charity for, Japan because they feel sorry for it. They're there because, from the US perspective, keeping the entire Pacific and the US West Coast safe from Russia and from China requires having basically Japan as an aircraft carrier, just like West Germany, which they stocked full of troops after World War II, to basically be the ones who would catch it first if the Russians ever marched across Europe. And, you know, Japan's the one that's supposed to catch it first. If the Soviet Union, now Russia, probably less of a concern, but China certainly, and maybe North Korea, Japan is like the first line of defense against an attack across the Pacific. And Japan pays for most of the American forces that are still in the same bases and playing the same role that they were as when they were occupying Japan for, you know, 10 years after World War II, or 8 years, I guess it was. So Japan was about to pay $2 billion to install 2 of these Aegis Ashore Arrrr stations in Japan. And the defense minister announced this week that, they reviewed it, apart from the fact that they had a lot of difficulty persuading the communities where these sites were going to be based that this was not going to make them targets for missile attacks themselves. They also made a few mistakes about locating, about logistics, about they actually used Google Earth to estimate the topography to figure out that they need to have a clear view, like not have two steep mountains going out towards. Oh, they had to be sheltered by mountains or something like that, and they used Google Earth for this. The Japanese, you know, fourth most expensive military in the world, they used Google Earth, which has exaggerated topographic data, and they thought that it was shielded by mountains when it wasn't. So they put it in the wrong place. Everyone was against it, and it cost $2 billion, and they came to the conclusion this is a waste of time. So the defense minister just announced this week, you know what, we're canceling the whole thing. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. First of all, this is more for America than it's for Japan, and Japan was going to pay $2 billion for the whole thing. It's also right ahead of the planned defense cost-sharing negotiations. So if you ask me, this is a chance in a way. This is a little bit of a North Korean tactic, but it's taking something that they were going to pay for anyway off the table, and then they can put it back on the table, and it'll look like a compromise later. So it could be quite smart like that. It could just be that they don't think that Trump's going to win the election, and that they don't, you know, that they can get away with taking this off and not incurring his wrath. But this is really, really messing with America's own defense plans. And this is the thing. This isn't about Japan's security. This is about America's national security, that Japan just basically canceled America's whole West Coast defense strategy, which they were going to get along with $2 billion, and they just canceled it. So there was a funny, the US government announced after the government said they've definitely canceled it and they're doing a tour of the country now apologizing for canceling it. The US government reacted saying that it's not revoked, they're just looking at it. It reminded me of the Norwegian parrot sketch in Monty Python. It's not dead, it's just sleeping. The Americans were kind of caught off guard, and they were kind of shocked. But you know, the Americans have been telegraphing for a long time now that they were about to screw Japan. They were basically about to prostitute their US forces, selling them as like protection mercenaries, and they were going to increase the protection money costs. And Japan has just said, hey, you know what, maybe we won't spend all those billions of dollars buying your stuff to defend you. And now they're freaking out. I do find that kind of funny. And I think it's actually quite smart tactics. And, you know, maybe I'm biased. I think it's crazy when North Korea does it and when Japan does it. It's being smart. Who knows? I could be wrong. But yes, base on the moon. Japan is establishing a space force just like America, which is probably just as crazy. The Norwegian blue. Beautiful plumage. But that's pretty much... by the way, Taro Kono, the current defense minister, he was the foreign minister before this. And he is a... You know, to quote The Onion, there's the Onion fake news videos where they have news talk shows. There's a great show from years and years ago where they have a 911 truther on a talk show along with a member of Al Qaeda talking about you know, the 9/11 denial. And the Al Qaeda person says, listen, when it comes to the US government, we're all in agreement. They're a den of jackals. However, I assure you, we did it. It's dark humor, but I actually really love the expression. The Japanese cabinet is a den of jackals, right? They're all, of course, they're all terrible people. But Taro Kono, I actually find I find him kind of likable within a group of among the jackals. I actually find him quite likable, and this is an interesting play. Everyone, by the way, the biggest rival to Abe within the government right now, or for years, the person sort of in waiting to become the next prime minister, Shigeru Ishiba. He's I believe he's ex self-defense forces. He's certainly a military nut, and he was the ex-defense minister. So this is also kind of sticking it to him. No one within the LDP knew about this before it was announced, and they're all freaking out that, oh, we can't be cancelling our new missile program. So yeah, it's kind of definitely throwing the cat among the pigeons. Everyone is upset, and plus you get to say Aegis Ashore, Arrrr. So yeah, it's actually kind of funny, and it's kind of interesting. But there's more funny and interesting, and we have 15 minutes, and I want to play some Korg today, so I'm going to move on to the next story. I also see the J-Vlog. Excellent to have you there, and nice to see people know their Monty Python. Indeed, Will. Pining for the fjords, the Aegis system. It's not dead, it's just pining for... What is it pining for? For Arizona? Who knows? The Atomic Tom, good to see you. The North Korean leadership, horrible but not stupid. Well, stupid's a pretty low threshold. I wouldn't say that they're stupid, although, yes, they're tiresome. Mitch B. I do not hate America, and in fact, like I said in the beginning, I am actually against American isolationism. I think the role that they play here, that they've made Japan wealthy, the presence of those defense bases in Japan is actually critical. I think what's horrible is the fact that right now the U.S. military, the strategy of the U.S. government right now is to use them for profit, for financial profit, not for U.S. security, and that's where this is coming off the rails. I actually think that they're playing a vital role, and it actually dishonors the people who are serving the US in this region, that they're basically treating them like mercenaries right now and as negotiation pawns on stuff which shouldn't be negotiated. And this tactic, this cancellation of Aegis Ashore, I just said it's a North Korean tactic. It's actually stupid, but it's kind of countering stupid with stupid, and I think they're kind of thinking this through. When they're walking into a room where America is about to extort Japan over defense costs, which is stupid, and it's against America's interests, and the interests of the entire region. It's against Taiwan's interests. It's against Philippines' interest. China must be loving it. But it's all a result of the way that they're doing this with their allies. So, like I said, I just hope America improves its government, and there's an opportunity to do that soon. But no disrespect at all to the U.S. forces or to America at all. So, yes. Yes, indeed, we still have Towns of the Night, People of the Night, the host and hostess bars in Japan, particularly in Kabukicho in Shinjuku, are still causing clusters to occur right now, and that is causing again we're at about 35 cases every day. We had a couple of days more than 40, so it's not down really. For Tokyo, you want under 10. That was the criteria that was used for lifting the state of emergency. So that is happening. A lot of people in Tokyo, government surveys have found there is this big policy thing about getting everybody to move out of Tokyo, to spread the population. As the whole country is losing people, Tokyo is growing, but it's not growing based on births. It's grown on everyone running away from small towns, particularly young people getting out of small towns, leaving them destitute and unable to sustain business because there are no young people to take jobs, and they're all going into Tokyo. And this over-concentration in Tokyo has actually been seen as a problem since the Edo period. And it's kind of deliberate, but again, politicians, the way that the Japanese parliament works is that people from small rural areas have disproportionate. Their votes are basically worth 4 or 5 times the vote. In fact, it used to be crazy. It used to be 20 times worth the votes of people in Tokyo. So a lot of the people who sit in parliament are from regions that are being depopulated, and they all hate Tokyo, but they're in Tokyo because that's where the parliament is. Tokyo is underrepresented, and there's been a lot of people for a long time saying we have to force people, we got to move the capital or force people to live outside of Tokyo so that the economies, of all the local areas where these people come from can be sustained. And I've always thought, well, if people want to live in Tokyo, let them live in Tokyo. Tokyo is awesome because people come here, and offer a better alternative. However, there's an interesting thing. It's expensive to live in Tokyo. And what we're learning in this COVID-19 situation is that while certainly there are a lot of jobs that you can't do remotely, there are a lot of jobs that you can do remotely. In fact, a lot of good paying jobs in IT, in services and financial services and whatnot. You can, actually do. People are learning that I've been working remotely since March, and I'm probably not going to be going back for a couple more months yet. And in that situation, I haven't gotten in a car, I haven't ridden a train or anything. I'm in Tokyo, but I could be doing this exactly the same if I was in Hokkaido or Okinawa as I was in Tokyo, if I had a good internet connection. And that being the case, first of all, companies are definitely, now we know that people can work and they don't have to be physically in the same office to be effective working. Two, companies are learning that they can save a lot of money on overhead. Some companies are actually closing their offices, partly to save money and partly because workers like working remotely. And so you add to that, so the idea that it's cheaper living outside of Tokyo. You could have people with good paying jobs that can be done remotely, where they could go outside of Tokyo. They could increase land and economic values outside of Tokyo. Plus, the government spends so much money on campaigns to pay subsidies to get people, to convince people to move. To me, there's a really actually interesting opportunity right now. A lot of people in Tokyo are interested that, you could be paying a quarter the rent, living in a really great place that's great for a family, and still be having a Tokyo-based job that you could be doing just as effectively. So I think there's a really interesting time right now. And I think this is happening in America too, where people are finding out you don't have to be paying, $4,000 a month to rent a room in San Francisco to work in an IT company. You can actually live further away, pay reasonable rent, get a great income, save lots of money, and you can be helping the economy where you are, as well as helping your own company save money. And I don't know, this is a really interesting time. Again, things take time to move, but I think the conditions are really actually ripe for anyone who, if they recognize how ripe the opportunity is in Japan to actually promote remote work and merge it with an idea of getting people to live more outside of Tokyo. I think there's actually like a multiple win. Pay subsidies to companies that let people work remotely, and pay extra subsidies to them if they let them work outside of Tokyo. And then the people, have those companies pay the subsidy through to the employees that choose to live outside of Tokyo, which will be in addition to their income, which will be in addition to the savings that they're making from living outside of Tokyo. And you've got a pretty compelling, why would you live inside Tokyo if you could get paid more money and pay a quarter the rent, and live somewhere nicer? So I'm hoping that they jump on this anyway. I've mentioned parental abduction before, for example. Sorry, 4K for rent. When I say Tim the Asian Egg, I mean per month. Sorry, Japan, everything's per month. So definitely, I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley will pay $1,000 a week for a room. In fact, more than that. I've heard of people that, actually earn like, six figures easily, and they can't afford to rent like a single room in a place in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. But I get aggravated when the parental abduction issue gets mixed up with the Japanese, like with the North Korean abduction issue, or actual like criminal abduction. But certainly parental abduction is a problem. I've talked about it here before. It's a situation where parents in the midst of a divorce, and often, sometimes before a divorce, often during a divorce, where there is a custody dispute, one of the parents decides to just grab the kids and run away with them, often to a country which has favorable family courts, which will allow them to basically get an advantage in the dispute. And in the case of Japan, which doesn't recognize joint custody or visitation, essentially, if you get your kid to Japan, and you have sole custody, you're able to get a sole custody order, the other parent never gets to see the kid again. And this is not just true of international custody cases, it's true domestically as well. If you get divorced in Japan, it's typical that the parent who doesn't have custody of the kids kind of loses contact with the kids. They're actually cut off entirely. And this is something that's actually bad for kids. It's shown it's harmful for the kids, and it's harmful for the estranged, for both of the parents, but especially the estranged parent. And there are moves in Japan to address this, and it renders things like the Hague Convention on Parental Aspects of Child Abduction, that Japan was kind of forced under pressure to sign up to. Renders it meaningless because the family law system here doesn't have enforcement mechanisms, and it doesn't have a concept of joint custody which it could enforce, even if it's meeting its treaty obligations to enforce foreign custody orders in Japan. So the European Union has done the right thing. They've taken, there are many parents outside of Japan in the situation who have been denied access to their kids. And yeah, they've actually unanimously criticized Japan, again, for not having a family law system that's consistent with its obligations under the Hague Convention to be able to give parents access to kids and kids access to their parents in these sorts of cases, and is demanding that they actually develop a modern system of family law that's consistent with its international obligations. And I completely go the EU. Good on them for doing that. That's exactly the problem. And the more pressure that can be brought to bear on Japan, it's not an easy thing to actually set up a functioning family law system where one doesn't exist, but it's needed. And good on them for doing this. So yeah, to Huawei as a question, why are Japanese women so afraid of bugs? Bugs are nature. Well, who knows? Some are, some aren't. I've seen guys as well. I remember in New Zealand I flatted with a Japanese guy in a quite new apartment, but there was like a mouse in the apartment once. And when he saw it, I mean, he screamed like a girl. I guess when you're just isolated from nature, particularly in places like Tokyo, you can be. You know what? I'd be really surprised if women in more rural towns where you do just are closer to nature and you have it come in their house more often, if they would be like that. In Tokyo, I think it's just being in Tokyo more than being women. But yeah, starchy pancakes, excellent to see you. And have you there in the comments, and 80K per year is a poverty line in San Francisco. Yeah, I believe you. I know people who are over there, and again, you frequently hear about engineers who are earning, salaries that would be having them, living in the best housing anywhere other than, but in San Francisco, they can't even afford a room or find a room. So yeah. Aegis Ashore, again, not revoked, it's just sleeping. TBS, this is gone, so I don't know what that was. That's a dead link. Oh, this is the final funny story. Okay, we got 5 minutes. The Minister of Justice, the man on the right and his wife, or now the man on the right in this photo and his wife, former model on the left, they got caught paying bribes, election bribes. They were paying people. They actually dished out total of $300,000 roughly, to about 90 people, mainly local politicians that they asked to go around and do campaigning on their behalf. So they were paying them kind of a stipend for going, is the way that they phrased it, for going around and campaigning on their behalf in a re-election campaign. However, they were just handing out cash everywhere. And this guy, I repeat, the guy on the right, the husband, both of them are politicians, national level politicians. This is like, and the guy on the right was the Minister of Justice. He was the Minister of the Justice Ministry in Abe's cabinet. And in a re-election campaign, he basically had a full money pumping machine where they were bribing everyone in sight. And it was so brazen that some of the people who received the bribes felt so awkward, they kind of gave it back, and they reported it to the police. And the police are investigating them. And both of them apparently used these tactics. The couple, they're a married couple who happen to be politicians. And yeah, they are both in jail right now. They're about to undergo trial. This is like, Nancy Pelosi and, I don't know, the Attorney General being married together and being investigated. I mean, he's like the Minister of Anti-Justice. It's like the opposite of anyone doing this. And it's a high-ranking position in the Japanese government. He is in jail. He's facing a long jail sentence for election fraud, bribery, and corruption. And both of them are. The news stories about the investigation into them, about, like, for example, he's gone and destroyed all of his computers that show all the records of the money transactions, and he asked everybody when he was handing the money over not to issue receipts. So he knew that what he was doing was criminal. Of course he knew it was criminal. He's the Minister of Justice. He's an expert on criminal law. But the wife, the accounts from the Shukan Bunshu, is that when investigators raided her apartment, the home, at 11:30 p.m. One evening, she resisted when the investigators were in the house by taking off all of her clothes and throwing used sanitary products at the investigators, saying, "Why don't you check this?" So, again, imagine this is like Nancy Pelosi or something. Well, I guess she's opposition, but someone who's basically very prominent in the government cabinet doing crazy. I always like to joke how, like, Japan has great scandals. I love talking about Japanese scandals, as you know. I always look at the Korean scandals, and they always look like they're like an extra degree up in drama and extremeness. But I don't know, I feel like Japan's upping its game. Go Japan. Some of the crazy on this one is like, it's next level stuff. So congratulations. Japan not being left behind. I mean, when the Minister of Justice himself is the one doing this, and this is actually just on the heels of the whole big drama around the chief prosecutor and Abe Crony basically being forced out of the job for playing mahjong. I mean, basically for playing a poker game with two journalists. I mean, all the levels are stupid around that. But immediately after this, there's like hellfire is now raining down upon the Abe cabinet. This could actually bring down the prime minister. I mean, he appointed the anti-justice Minister of Justice. So, yeah, like I say, and I was just tweeting, I'm so happy. I'm so happy after all of this endless talk about disease for like months. It's so great to have a really good scandal to distract. That's just so crazy and so stupid and so extreme. I mean, this is some really next level stuff. So congratulations to the Koais, and thank you for improving the news cycle. Good on you. Yeah, Japan, as I mentioned before, easing entry bans. One re-entry on foreigners. In fact, as a permanent resident, I think I am now allowed to, if I need to leave the country. But they were really restricted. They allowed Japanese to come back to Japan, but they have restricted, as I think most countries have actually, the idea of foreign residents, particularly like students and temporary sort of residents, but people who are legally resident in Japan, from going home and coming back again. Particularly, you can imagine if they're going to places like the UK or US that have a lot of problems. And part of the reason is that they just don't have a good travel airport-based quarantine sort of process at all. So they're just basically restricting it to people who, to Japanese people. However, for countries that have more or less gotten their COVID-19 situations under control, Japan has opened negotiations with Vietnam, Thailand, Australia, and New Zealand, and they've just concluded the first deal to allow business travel and probably tourism with Vietnam as the first country. And yeah, it looks like for me I might be able to go to New Zealand. We'll see how it goes. New Zealand's got it way better under control than Japan, and frankly Japan might not meet up to New Zealand standards. We'll see what Australia thinks as well. Those are in negotiation, but they're not expected to happen soon. They're expecting Thailand will be next, but still we'll see. Final thing, which I want to mention. Geez, I'm exactly on now. I'm going to play a track anyway. I've set up for this. The Japan just released its contact tracing app this week. Unlike a lot of countries that want to have geo-tracking, they want to have personal information tracking, like in South Korea, they would actually publish the information of who it is and if they're standing next to you right now and where they got it from. And this all worked really well until like 3,500 people ended up being connected to a large gay bar when they reopened Seoul. People all of a sudden became a little bit sensitive about the location and personal information sharing. UK as well, their contact tracing app collapsed because the government wanted to actually track people's movements and track it all centrally. The app which they're using in Japan is based on the Singaporean app, and it's basically designed to protect privacy. It's peer-to-peer. There's no central tracking. There's no GPS tracking. It will only basically log the Bluetooth connections of phones around you if you're on an Android or iOS phone. And if you stay in close contact with anyone for like more than an hour, it will just log that these phones were connected, these users were connected. And if one of those people that you've been connected to within 1 meter for more than 15 minutes happens to come out later on as having COVID-19, everybody who that person has been within 1 meter for more than 15 minutes in the last 14 days will get a notification that, one of the people that you've been in contact with in the last 2 weeks now has COVID-19, and it will give you information on how you can go get tested. And presumably, since you'll be proven that you have been in close contact, you'll be able to get a test. So yeah, there's no personal information, no GPS, no central tracking, and the idea is it's a good one for knowing if you've been in contact with somebody, then you need to get tested. And two, it's also good that if you become sick yourself, it allows everybody who's been within a meter of you for the last 2 weeks, which you couldn't possibly remember, and that's the way they're doing it right now. They're actually investigating who are all the people that you've met in the last 2 weeks, which is nearly impossible. They automate this so that they can actually go and identify and test everybody and make sure that it doesn't spread. So if you ask me, again, it's been shown by the University of Oxford that to be effective, 60% of the population has to use this app. Right now it's been downloaded 2.4 million times, which is a lot, but it's nowhere near the 60 million that's needed. I know a lot of people are suspicious of the idea it might be tracking personal information or spying on them, whatever. There are also concerns that the use of Bluetooth on the phone, it could be burning up the phone's battery. I've noticed that a little bit. But I still think this is like wearing a mask. This is something that you should do. Not just like, to me, this is the same as wearing a mask. You do it not just to protect yourself, but to protect other people. So if you're in Japan, definitely go check out the app. I have it installed, 2 days, totally clear so far. But I think the whole point is that having this app in this way and having enough people using it means that the government can manage clusters and outbreaks without the need to do lockdowns anymore. They can actually reliably know who they can go chase up to test and treat and isolate without the need to, lock down the entire population again. So for second and the third and the fourth waves that are definitely coming, this is a really good thing, and I think the Japanese government's actually executed it in the way that they always do. They look at all the examples of the people who did it, and they take what they think are the best practices, and they implement them. And this is something which, if you're in Japan, I definitely encourage you to download the app. Media giants did fake polls. The government's actually now advocating for abolishing mandatory physical seals and allowing e-signature, which is great for me. This is kind of funny. The Tokyo election poster, all over Tokyo now, there are these billboards with, there were like 21 people running for governor of Tokyo. But, I love this. This is basically near anyone's house in Tokyo right now, they've got this billboard where they're filling up all the posters of all the candidates. And the main people, there's Koike, the green one on the end there. There's Yamamoto Taro, who's a bit of a loopy, sort of far left kind of crazy guy, but he's quite popular. He's on her right, the purple one. Then there's the elderly bald gentleman. He's endorsed by all the left-wing parties. He's like the former head of the Lawyers Association. These are all normal people. The person below the bald gentleman, my son's favorite politician, he's pledged to destroy, to North Korea style, explode NHK. He wants to destroy NHK and also declare war on Russia and China. And he's being endorsed by the pornographic former website sort of chain, jailed for financial fraud millionaire beside him, Horia, who's endorsing Tachibana. And although he's not running, he's actually put 2 posters on each billboard on either side of Tachibana, which is actually kind of against the rules. But my favorite one actually is the youngest person running. This guy Nishimoto. He's like, how old is he? He's like 20 something years old. He's a host. He is a host by profession, but he's also he's from the band Super Crazy Kun. So here he is. He looks like a Tochigi Yankee, basically. Like he's probably got a sword and a baseball bat. He's got literally like the Bosozoku clothes on. And his slogan is that he's super crazy. In Kabukicho, that's Kabukicho sign. That is some crazy shit. So he is running. And vote today. If you can vote, if you're Japanese, Nishimoto, super crazy kun. He's these nuts. It's literally the Japanese these nuts. You vote today. Getting rid of Hanko. There's the guy who designed the app, which I think he did a very good job. There's the lady who resisted investigation. And the reason that Japan's jobless rate is still 2.6% is because it's legally impossible to fire people. And that's the end of all the prepared topics that we have tonight, 36. So it's exactly 1 hour. Should I do a track? I want to do a track. I'm all set up for a track. I still can't do this in under an hour, even when I'm like rushing like crazy. I'm going to do a track, and it's going to be 83 BPM, and it's going to be hopefully good. I've just realized I plugged this in wrong. Let's put that in there. Let's put this here. Let's turn this on. Let's 10% battery. That's not good. Let's plug in some battery. Okay, I haven't done some Chaos later in Aegis. Plus, I do believe that I can let's see if I can get this working. Give me a second. We don't have technical issues on this show. They're a feature. Boom. Can I? I've got to move the monitor. Okay. Let's just try to work with this. We'll orient that there. We'll turn on the audio input capture, which is a bit staticky, and let's create a new track. Yes. Let's just check that the sound. There is sound, so that is good. Okay, let's just make a track. Let's make it my jogging beat. So let's make it 83 BPM. Okay, let's start out. I want to put a vinyl sound on it. have that kind of pseudo chill hop thing. So that was down here somewhere, vinyl. The vinyl sound. Oh, better record that. Okay, let's put a beat on it. Let's what does this one sound like? I can do that. I feel like I want a hi-hat on this as well. Let's put lots of drums on this. Where's the hi-hat? Okay. That's pretty cool. I've only got 2 channels left though. What should I do? Should I do bass? Should I do... What kind of a hook should we make? Bass is often too much. Let's go for a filter piano. Let's change the key. Yeah, I want to get a cool sort of organ. You know what, let's make that the main part. Now let's just do a sequential bass. Okay. That's pretty cool. Dig that. Okay, let's get a 16. that's the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Good as always talking to you. That's pretty cool. I'm going to save that one. Remember, I'm back here. Well, you can follow me during the week on Twitter. And yes, I'm back here every Sunday night, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. That was fun and that was easy enough to do. And yeah, have a good week, everybody. Remember to like the video if you liked, and keep cool till after school. Boom. Peace. Kakita no. Nesta125, excellent to see you there, by the way. And thanks everyone else who commented. And yeah, have a good week.